In this tutorial, we are going to be creating a hybrid animal. You're going to be selecting different animal parts and using a selection tool or selection tools of your choice. Going to be combining various animal parts to create one crazy looking hybrid animal. And the objective really is to get just familiarize yourself and practice using the selection tools, but also renaming layers and being able to use a transform tool to move and properly place the different animal parts. So I'm just going to give you an example but with two pictures, and then you guys will get started after that. If you want to follow along with this example, you can. So we have, if I zoom out, I have a sheep and a donkey, and let's say I wanted to place the sheep's head on the donkey. The first thing that we want to do is we want to select the sheep's head. Now I'm going to zoom in using the zoom tool right here, and I just kind of roped around the sheep's head, or you can just click, to zoom in. So I'm just going to do that again. And I like to use a quick selection tool, and you can adjust this brush size right here. 17 is good for me for right now, and I'm just going to hold down and click, or hold down the cursor and just kind of go over the sheep's head. Okay, and remember, if you don't get all of it, that's okay, because you can just go back and keep on clicking. If you went outside the sheep's head, you can hold down Alt, and you'll see that it'll transition to a minus sign, and you can kind of shave off the areas that you don't want. You can see that. And remember, you want to take time when selecting your object in Photoshop, because there's a really big difference between the quality of people who just do a really quick job selecting and the people who actually take time and get all those details. But for a lot of these tutorials that I'm doing them kind of quickly, just to so that you understand the point, rather than you waiting for me to actually go and do it perfectly. So once I have the sheep's head selected, okay, and I'm going to go and maybe touch that up a little bit. Alright, that looks pretty good. Maybe get that off. Now what I'm going to do is I want to kind of show you the before and after. I can click on this right up here and just drag it out. And I'm going to use the move tool, click right here, and I'm going to just drag it, click inside the sheep's head, and drag it over onto the sheep's body. Okay, so what I'm doing is I just used the move tool and I dragged it over. However, I want to show you another way of doing that, or at least one step before we drag it over. So right now it kind of looks like it's a kind of a cutout, like you're making a collage. You can see these edges pretty defined. One thing that I want to show you, if I go back to the sheep head, when you're creating the hybrid animal, what I want you to do is, once you have this highlighted, I want you to use a selection tool. It doesn't matter which one, you can just be in the quick selection tool if you want, and I want you to right click and go to refine edge. And when you go to right click refine edge, you can make adjustments to the edge of the object that you selected to make it look a lot nicer. So the ones that we're going to focus on here today is the adjust edge. If you want to shift the slider to smooth, you can see that it kind of smooths out the outline rather than the kind of just kind of rough outline that the quick selection tool did automatically. So it's nice, you can adjust the smoothness to kind of smooth it out. Feathering, you can make the edges kind of somewhat transparent, right? If you want to give a little transparent glow around the outside of your object, you can. Obviously, if you do it too much, it'll go away, depending on the size, but maybe a little bit of feathering. And this feathering helps blend two images together. If you don't want to see a distinctive line, feathering is a good way to kind of blend between two objects. Contrast, right? If you want it super contrasty, if you want it to actually look like a cutout from a magazine, like you're doing a paper cutout collage, that's fine. But in this hybrid animal, I want you to kind of transition the images as nicely as possible. So I'd probably leave the contrast at 0, and then you can shift the edges. If you selected everything and you selected it too much or too little, you can shift the edge right, and that'll select the outside of the edge. If you selected too much and you want to kind of shrink the selection area, you can shift the edge and make it a little bit smaller so you don't see the outside. Anything outside the sheep's head. So you can play around with that and get the selection just the way you want it, and then you can click OK. And once you do that, then use the move tool right up here and drag it over, and it looks very similar from the same, zoomed out. But if I zoom in, let's say to 2 different areas, and a lot of Photoshop, there's a lot of subtle differences, but if you take a look at maybe this part right here, the ear, you can see that smooth, when I refined the edge smooth and feather, it blended it a little bit and made the edges a little bit smoother. So, I like the way this one turned out a lot better than the first sheep head. And that's going to be big when you're doing collages, when you're doing a lot of Photoshop manipulation. You want to refine the edge exactly the way you want it. So what we're going to do from here is I'm going to click Z or press on the zoom tool. I'm going to click Fit to Screen, and I'm going to actually delete that first one because the second one with the refined edges, that looks better. So to delete an object, I'm going to click on the layer right here, and I'm going to just drag it down to the trash can right here. And then this layer right here, you got to rename it sheephead, okay? And then I can use the move tool and move it, and if you need to shrink it down or resize it, you can hit Command T to get the transform or the bounding boxes. It's the transform tool, and then you can hold down Shift and you can scale it down if need be. If you want to rotate it, you can rotate it. If you're doing like wings or something like that and you need to manipulate like the wing, or you're doing a leg and it's supposed to be a right leg, not a left leg, you can also flip too, which will come in handy for like ears and feet. You can also flip as well if need be. So I'm going to position that like so, and now when I'm done, I could hit Enter. Okay, and now I have the start of my hybrid animal, and I refined the edges of the sheep's head, and I renamed the layer. So in this assignment, I want you to create a hybrid animal of your own and refine the edges to make the transition between the two look nice, and make sure you also rename the layers in your layer palette. So when you're done with the hybrid animal, you should have a bunch of layers that are appropriately labeled. And then to save it, right, File, Save As, we save it as a Photoshop file so that we can preserve the all-important layers.